Thank you, Jonathan. So, as there are only 2 laryngologists in this room, I will give a bit of an introduction to give you an idea of what we are talking about when I talk of vocal folds, vibration, phonation, that stuff. So, the study I'm going to present here is based on animal studies which we started in 2015. We are using an bovine model of aged female sheep. Usually, Feliciano, can you show me how to do the light again? So, when you come to visit our department in Graz, the laryngology department, we perform an examination as shown here in this video, and I hope you can hear some of the sound. So this is a medical student, she's undergoing examination. We put the endoscope through her mouth. This is the left vocal fold, this is the right vocal fold. And this is the epiglottis. Underneath here you see the trachea. Everything is, the vocal folds consist of a muscle, the vocalis muscle, and it's covered by mucosa, the laryngeal mucosa. And you see that during vibration leads to sound production, and her vocal folds are closing totally. On the other video here, which is upside down, as we were using meanwhile endoscopy through the nose, you see a 73-year-old female patient, and you can see here the right vocal fold, left vocal folds here. Here is the epiglottis. So here's the entrance to the esophagus and the trachea. And if the light would do as we command, you can see. Thanks. Well, just show you once again. You can see that here appears a glottic gap. So glottic is the space between the vocal folds, and due to atrophy of the vocalis muscle, this aged patient here is suffering from the glottal gap, and this is our target. This is the target of the whole study, that we try to reduce, to diminish the space of this glottal gap by inducing hypertrophy of the muscles, of the laryngeal muscles. So, but of course, vocal aging has many reasons, and they are not just aging of the laryngeal muscles. We also find in aging patients sarcopenia of the pulmonary muscles, diminished pulmonary elasticity, decrease of the vital capacity, which leads to reduced loudness of the voice and to a reduced time where you can phonate. MPT stands for maximum phonation time. It's a measure, everybody can try that on himself or herself. Breathe in as deeply as you can and try to hold an A for as long as you can. You should reach at least 14 seconds. And if the vital capacity of the lung is decreasing, you will subsequently have a decreased maximum phonation time. Reduced blood pressure, as induced by decrease of the vital capacity, leads to reduced loudness of the voice. But of course also the quality of the neuromuscular function is decreasing during aging. So what are typical signs of aged voices? Not only that you need hearing aids. Typical signs of aged voices are hoarseness. It's a rough and breathy voice. It's vocal fatigue. So typically patients come to the office and say, well, I can speak without any problem until noon, but in the evening I really feel kind of sore throat. And all this leads finally to a social withdrawal of the patients, of the individuals. How do we diagnose an aged voice? By endoscopy, as I've shown you before. But the thing is, you don't see everything. So you see this glottal gap, but you don't see, for example, the neuromuscular function. And by perception, what do I mean with that? You can rate the impression the voice gives to the ear. And we usually grade so in German we are using the RPH scheme, which stands for roughness, and you rate it from 0, which is no affection, until to severe affection is scored with 3. So you rate for roughness, breathiness, and hoarseness. So this is how it's usually done. The problem that pops up here is that we do not have a generally accepted marker for aging voices like I have for blood pressure. You know that 120 to 80 is the norm value for blood pressure. We don't have anything like that for aged voices. So the objective was, if we can reverse signs of vocal aging, elicited by many factors, not just muscular factors, by functional electrical stimulation applied by surface electrodes over a defined period of time via electrodes. Now there's a relatively huge amount of literature describing the effects of FES on paralyzed vocal folds after, for example, thyroid surgery. As you know, or as you probably do not know, the vocal folds get nervous supply by the recurrent nerve, which is a branch of the 10th cranial nerve, the vagal nerve. And this nerve is highly at risk during thyroid surgery. So we've got many patients coming to our office with a unilateral or bilateral paralysis of the vocal folds. Unilateral paralysis leads to a hoarse voice, and bilateral paralysis leads to a stenosis at the height of the vocal folds and to dyspnea. So we need to tracheotomize these patients in many cases. So what we did in the pre-trial in sheep was that we stimulated the nerve, the vagal nerve or the recurrent nerve at different sites. So in the very first part, we stimulated the recurrent laryngeal nerve, and in a later trial, we stimulated just the terminal closing fibers of the nerve. So these are results from the trial where we stimulated the entire nerve, supplying both fibers to opening and closing muscles. And we saw, this was published already 3 years ago, that on the stimulated side we saw a significant increase towards thicker muscle fibers. So this was our feasibility study where we could show that it is working. This was the stimulation patterns. The stimulation was performed daily for a period of 8 weeks. This was followed by stimulation at another location. So the results I'm going to show next resulted from a stimulation at the terminal branch of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. And this was published last year in December. And you see here beautiful 3D reconstructions of ovine larynges, where you see the vocalis muscle on the left here and on the right here. And we could show that by stimulation around here, we could increase the muscular volume significantly at the stimulated site. So we know basically if we stimulate laryngeal nerves near, or if we stimulate exactly laryngeal nerves, it works. The muscle fibers increase, also the volume of the muscles, of the stimulated muscles go up. So now coming to our human trial. This is how the setting looked like in the hospital. So we put 2 conductive rubber electrodes at both sides of the thyroid cartilage where we suspect the laryngeal nerve to be. The position was lateral to the thyroid notch, and stimulation was done PowerLab software. During the stimulation, I had an anoscope, or I put an anoscope through the patient's nose to get a look at the vocal fold level. So this is how typical stimulation looked like. And unfortunately this sound does not work here, so does E, yeah. Who said E? It was Fabian. But you can see clearly that there is reaction at the level of the vocal folds, but unfortunately, if you watch the patient from the outside, you see that also all the other muscles of the neck are moving, such as the platysma or the prelaryngeal muscles. As you can see here, contractions in the neck region. And of course, if you stimulate the prelaryngeal muscles, this leads to a pull down of the larynx, which is changing the vocal tract. And I think that historically, I told you that studies exist where they examine the effects of stimulation in paralyzed vocal folds. This descensors of the larynx by stimulation of the prelaryngeal muscles led to change in vocal pitch, and this was mistaken with a reaction at the level of the vocal folds, which I think actually never happened. We could not confirm this. So in a pre-trial, we investigated 17 female patients. Why female patients? We want to keep it simple. And usually women are a bit more sensitive about their voice. So men just use their voice, and if it's okay, it's okay. If not, they remain silent. But women actually, this is not just a cliche, they care more. Yeah, they care actually about themselves, which is a good thing. So in this pre-trial, in our, well, changing from sheep to females, we tested 10 different stimulation parameters, and we found out that none of them worked for all patients. We could not elicit a glottal reaction with one pattern. You can see in this column here the number of patients. In all, we included 17 patients with the best pattern down here, sawtooth pulse shape, pulse duration of 50 milliseconds, frequency of 10 Hz. We could get a reliable glottic reaction in 10 out of 17. But non-stimulation set was suitable for all patients. So based on these results, we went into the prospective trial. In all, we included only 15 women. We made a public announcement in the newspapers. We screened more than 100 patients, and all that were left were just 15 women, which is, well, quite a number, and it was really, really hard to carry them over the period of the entire study. So 15 women were included, mean age was 66 plus minus 4 years. All of them reported voice complaints. We performed, prior to accepting them to the study, an endoscopy of the vocal folds where we excluded vocal fold pathologies. So none of them had, say, polyps or paresis or laryngeal cancer. After that, the patients were attributed to two groups. Either they were attributed to Group A, and Group A received 8 weeks of effective training, and Group B received 4 weeks of subthreshold stimulation, followed by the same stimulation pattern or by the Vero group or by significant stimulation of the laryngeal muscles. After that, we had an 8 weeks washout phase. In here, you see the timeline of all the experiments. So we performed screening examination. This was baseline examination. After 2 weeks, we visited the patients at home to see if they do the training properly. Each patient received a stimulation device, the Schufrit R2X Plus device. They took them home and they trained 5 days, or actually 5 days a week. First controlled visit at the clinic was after 1 month. There was a second home-based control. Study was finished at the second control at the clinic, which was 8 weeks after the beginning of the study. And as I said, we had 2 washout phases. So Group A received optimal stimulation over the entire 8 weeks, and Group B, as I said, just received subthreshold stimulation for the first 4 weeks, followed by optimal stimulation in the later 4 weeks. We gathered huge amounts of data, and just to give you an idea, I just put on this table the most important ones, which is mean fundamental frequency, which is the frequency I'm talking to you, is about, well, I'm talking in a frequency of, say, 120 Hertz to you. Women usually have much higher frequency of about 200 to 210 Hertz, and we know that this is decreasing during the lifespan. So after the menopause, women usually the voice pitch is going down by, say, 20 to 30 hertz. So for aged women, a fundamental frequency, mean frequency of around 180 to 190 hertz is normal. Jitter is a perturbation parameter and is a parameter for hoarseness. Maximum phonation time, I already told you, is the amount of time that you can phonate a vowel out, let's say. If you are losing air through this glottal gap, which is a sign of laryngeal aging, of course you're losing air during phonation, so the maximum phonation time would decrease. DSI stands for Dysphonia Severity Index, is a multivariate parameter taking into account other vocal-related parameters, and the VHI-12, quite an important parameter or quite an important test, is a tool where patients self-evaluate their voice. The stimulation protocol was like follows. In all but 3 patients, in the second phase, so patients in this phase are not necessarily the same as I showed you from phase 1, where we tested the stimulation patterns. In all but 3 of the 15 patients, sawtooth impulses were used. Amplitude was between 5 to 11 milliamps. Patients could choose the amplitude during home training by themselves. And we saw that after some weeks, the amplitudes the patients themselves turned them off. Pulse duration was 50 milliseconds, frequency 7 hertz. This was, we could not change that. This is how the Schufrit device was programmable. The patients received 5 seconds on, 2 seconds off cycles. Those patients who required direct endophone pulse form had a pulse duration of 1 millisecond and a frequency of 50 hertz. So patients had to exercise and they had to write a diary of their daily exercises for 3 minutes, 3 times in a row, 5 days a week. And during stimulation, they had to phonate certain patterns. The idea behind that is that we try to induce resistance training by that. So if you're phonetic A or A, like in German, the vocal folds close. So we thought that by electrical stimulation, the vocal folds would work against resistance, so that hypertrophy training leads to this hypertrophy of the vocal folds. So now coming to the results. Basically, how can you measure results in vocal folds? You can either judge the glottic shape, and you're meanwhile experts and see that these vocal folds here don't close completely. So you can judge the vocal folds and the vocal fold vibration, or you can judge on the parameters, which are, of course, a consequence of vocal fold vibration. So you see here in these graphs arm A, arm B. To remind you, arm A received full training for 8 weeks, arm B just for 4 weeks. Interestingly, arm B had initially much higher mean fundamental frequency, mean speaking frequency compared to arm A, but over the course of time, this did not change. Talking of voice handicap index, which is the questionnaire where patients can rate their voices by themselves, we saw that patients actually judged themselves. So a voice handicap index below 8 points shows no handicap, but you see here that patients had some minor handicap, and this improved interestingly over the course of time, but it was not significant, and it improved in both arms. So in the, let's call it half placebo arm as well as in the arm that received full stimulation over the 8 weeks. Maximum phonation time, the amount of time that you can phonate the vowel A, the normal value is, you should be able to phonate no more than 14 seconds, but this was the case in all patients. So even initially, they had a maximum phonation time of 19 seconds, which is quite normal, and it did not change. The same was true for the jitter parameter, which is an indicator for hoarseness. They had hoarse voices, slightly hoarse voices, but this did not change. The same was true for the sound pressure level, which is the loudness of the voice. It remains stable from the first to the last visit if you watch the mean values here. And this phonia severity index, which is an index that takes into account several vocal parameters. So this was really a huge study. It took over a year, all in all. Over the course of time, we did not find significant change in any of the parameters so far. What could be explanations for that? Maybe the patients, they were on their own while home training. Maybe the pulses were not delivered properly, who knows? I mean, they were instructed well. And the reason why we made this visit 2 weeks after kick-off of the study at home was to see if they are doing the exercises properly. Maybe the pulses did not reach the target muscle, as you've seen in the video before, that we only reach the prelaryngeal muscles or the platysma muscle. And maybe it's just direct stimulation of the nerves that would lead to comparable results as we've seen in patients or in our sheep trials, or simply the selection of our patients was not good. Maybe they just didn't fit, maybe they weren't old enough, maybe, but again, we screened more than 100 patients and it would not have been possible to collect any more patients in my hometown. So this was it from my side. Like Fabian said, it's all teamwork. Thank you to all of the co-workers, and I'm happy to receive your questions now.
What is the difference with the time, for example, with the local police? You can train your voice, speaking aloud, singing.
Absolutely.
There is a big difference between what you get with stimulation and what you can get with just the physical training.
I mean, this is basically also physical training.
Yeah,
you just have some augmentation. But the thing is, there are, if you Google or if you go into PubMed and you're searching for logopedic training of the voice, you find hundreds of studies, but none of them is controlled, randomized. So it's all just case series. So you cannot really rely on that. And especially when it comes to voice, there are so many soft factors. It's what I said in the beginning. There are no really measurements how you can 100% sure characterize an aged voice. And for this reason, it's really super hard to compare. So actually, we would have needed to create parameters in whole of Austria to really identify parameters for aged voice, but this would lead nowhere.
Kind of biomarker, a biomarker for aging voice.
Biomarker? Well, I mean, it's just,
I mean, it's a question about age, so to find biomarkers which can measure what the level of aging of people and
but hoarseness or vocal tremor could be such a parameter actually, but so far it's not known.
Then if there are no other questions, sorry.
Markus, besides electrical stimulation, what is your conservative therapy till now? Have you also some studies done? What is your clinical experience?
The clinical experience is that since some years we get more and more patients coming to the office complaining about the voice. The typical patient in this study was a female patient around 65 years. She was a choir singer and she said, I cannot reach the high pitches I used to. So singing was not possible for them. So we sent them to speech-language pathologists for training, but it's not evidence-based. In very severe cases, you can also inject some fillers into the vocal folds, like hyaluronic acid, but this vanishes after some weeks.
So you could argue that they require a well-trained cohort anyway. Maybe you would choose a weaker cohort.
And this might be selection bias. So only people that are more aware than others about their voice took part in the study. Yeah.
Okay, well I think we should move on. Thank you very much. One more. Sorry.
The phonation time about 40 milliseconds, 40 seconds and over 40 seconds. This is a crucial marker.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
If I follow the concept of the glottic gap,
Yeah.
I'd say so, yeah. But again, it's not, I mean, the patient I showed you in the first video on the right side, she was a patient of the study, of course. She had the most beautiful glottic gap of all patients. This is why I showed it to you. So in all other patients who had voice complaints, they did not show such a beautiful glottic gap.
So everybody can measure 14 seconds. Is the patient able to phonate or not? Or
You can
it's
do
earlier.
that, but it's
So,
also, this is kind of a soft parameter. It depends on how much you inhale. I mean, just try by yourself. There's a huge variation in all of these parameters. Hmm?
The status of the patient from the lung.
Totally, totally. I know. And if you're, I mean, we excluded all patients with severe pulmonary diseases, of course. So nobody with asthma or COPD was included, but still.